The late afternoon sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawn, the kind of perfect, golden light that made everything look like a memory. For Chloe, pulling her pristine white SUV into the driveway, it should have been the picturesque end to a perfect 2-week vacation. She was tan, rested, and filled with the smug satisfaction that only a luxury girls' trip funded by her parents could provide. But the memory being created in that moment was not one of warmth and homecoming. It was one of sharp, geometric horror. There, staked into the impossibly green grass, was a sign. Its colors were a bold, vulgar red and white against the subtle elegance of the house. 4 words, professionally printed, shattered her world. For sale by owner. Chloe stared, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. It had to be a joke. A prank by her father, Richard, perhaps? No, it wasn't his style. His jokes were verbal, designed to cut, not to confuse. This was infrastructural. This was an attack on the very foundation of her life. She killed the engine and stepped out of the car, the warm air doing nothing to stop the chill spreading through her limbs. The house, their house, stood behind the sign, a masterpiece of modern architecture. Clean lines, vast panes of glass, a seamless blend of cedar and dark gray stone. It was a house that graced magazine covers. It was a house that announced, with quiet confidence, the success of its inhabitants. And it was for sale. Her husband, Liam, had designed it. He was an architect, or so he called himself. In her family circles, he was Chloe's husband, the one who doodles. They saw his profession as a quaint hobby, a gentleman's pursuit that produced little of actual value. He was quiet, maddeningly so, and possessed a stillness that her family interpreted as a lack of ambition. They were a family of loud pronouncements and aggressive acquisitions. Liam was a man of quiet observations and meticulous planning. For 5 years, they had treated him as a decorative, slightly disappointing accessory to their daughter's life. For 5 years, Chloe had allowed it. She had stood by, a silent enabler, as her father and brother mocked his small firm, as her mother offered him condescending advice on how to be more dynamic. And for 5 years, Liam had absorbed it all with a calm dignity that she had mistaken for weakness. He thought they were a team. He thought their life was built on a shared foundation. He didn't know that, in her family's eyes, he was living in a house he didn't deserve, with a wife who was settling. Within the next hour, he would correct their assumptions. All of them. Before we dive into the chain of events that led to this moment of stunning reversal, I want to take a second to say thank you for joining me. These stories resonate with so many of us because they touch on universal themes of respect, dignity, and the quiet strength it takes to reclaim them. If you enjoy narratives like this, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss what's next. And just for fun, drop a comment letting me know what city or country you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to that lawn and the silence before the storm. Chloe's luggage, a matching set of expensive, hardshell cases, sat on the flagstone walkway where the airport shuttle had left them. She ignored them, her focus entirely on the man who now appeared in the open doorway. Liam stood there, framed by the entrance he had designed. He was wearing simple gray trousers and a white linen shirt, his sleeves rolled up to the forearms. He looked calm. That was the most infuriating part. He wasn't frantic or apologetic or even angry. He looked like he was waiting for a dinner guest to arrive. "What is this?" Chloe's voice was sharp, a brittle thing in the tranquil air. She gestured wildly at the sign. "What is that? Is this a joke?" Liam's expression didn't change. There was no malice in it, but for the first time, there was also no trace of the gentle deference she was used to. There was only a profound, unshakable certainty. "It's not a joke, Chloe," he said, his voice even and clear. "The house is for sale." "The house, our house," she sputtered, the words feeling absurd on her tongue. "You can't sell our house. Why would you do this?" While I was gone, without even talking to me, he looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw 5 years of silent observation finally coalesce into a single, devastating judgment. He saw the woman who laughed when her father called his award-winning design for a public library a cute little book box. He saw the woman who stayed silent when her brother suggested Liam should get a real job in her father's real estate firm, starting in the mailroom. He saw the woman who, just 3 weeks ago at a family dinner, had placed a placating hand on his arm when he tried to defend the integrity of his work. "I'm selling my house," Liam said, the distinction landing with the force of a physical blow. "Your things are packed. They're in the guest room. I've arranged for a moving service to take them wherever you'd like." Chloe's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The logic of the situation had completely disintegrated. My house. Moving service? This wasn't a fight. It was an eviction. It was a corporate downsizing of their entire life. And he was speaking to her like a polite but firm HR manager. The foundation she had believed was solid rock was turning to sand beneath her feet. The trip, the relaxation, the smug superiority, it all evaporated, replaced by a cold, rising panic. She had left 2 weeks ago as the wife of a man she and her family pitted. She had come home to a stranger who was calmly dismantling her world, starting with the front lawn. The balance of power, which she had never even thought to question, had not just shifted. It had been inverted, and she was in free fall. She hadn't even taken her sunglasses off yet. The roots of this earthquake had been planted long ago, in the fertile soil of her family's arrogance. The first tremors were felt at a dinner party 3 weeks before Chloe's trip. The setting was her parents' home, a sprawling, ostentatious mansion that screamed new money. It was all polished marble, gold fixtures, and furniture that was chosen for its price tag rather than its comfort. Liam had always found the house exhausting, an architectural representation of a panic attack. He sat at the long, polished mahogany table, a silent island in a sea of booming voices. His father-in-law, Richard, held court from the head of the table. Richard was a man whose personality filled every corner of a room, leaving little oxygen for anyone else. He was a commercial real estate developer who had bullied his way to a considerable fortune, and he believed his success in business made him an expert on all other subjects. His wife, Eleanor, sat opposite him, a woman whose entire existence seemed dedicated to reflecting her husband's glory and ensuring her children's social standing. Their son, Marcus, was a younger, less polished version of Richard, all swagger and inherited confidence, without the track record to back it up. And then there was Chloe, beautiful, elegant Chloe. Liam had fallen in love with her intelligence and her laughter, but he had watched, with a growing sense of quiet despair, as those qualities were slowly eroded by the constant pressure to conform to her family's narrow definition of success. Tonight, she sat beside him, but she felt miles away. "The deal is finally closed," Richard announced, slapping the table with a meaty hand, making the silverware jump. "The entire waterfront parcel, 30 acres. We're going to build the most exclusive mixed-use development this city has ever seen. The Blackwood Bluffs." He said the name as if he were christening a battleship. Eleanor beamed. "Richard, that's wonderful. I've already been speaking with a branding consultant. The logo should be something regal." "Of course it should be regal," Marcus chimed in, puffing out his chest. "This is a legacy project. It's going to put the family name on the map for good." Liam remained silent, swirling the wine in his glass. He knew the Blackwood Bluffs parcel. He knew it intimately. A prospective buyer, a cautious investment group from out of state, had hired his firm 6 months ago to conduct a preliminary feasibility study. His geological surveyors had found significant issues with soil instability and erosion risk, particularly along the cliff-facing edge where Richard planned to build luxury condos. Liam's report had been unequivocal. Building on that specific section of the land without extensive, ruinously expensive foundational reinforcement was not just unwise, it was reckless. The investment group had quietly walked away from the deal. "Something wrong, Liam?" Richard's voice cut through his thoughts. "You're awfully quiet. Not impressed by a 9-figure deal?" He chuckled, and Marcus joined in. Liam chose his words carefully. "It's an ambitious project. That parcel has unique geological challenges." Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Challenges, schmallenges. Nothing a good bulldozer can't fix. That's the problem with you architect types. You see problems. I see opportunities. You doodle on paper. I move earth. The insult was delivered with a broad, self-satisfied grin. Chloe shot Liam a look. It was the look he had come to dread. Don't start. Just let it go. It was a plea for peace at the expense of his dignity. But this time, the insult had a different weight. This wasn't just about his pride. This was about public safety. I'm not talking about doodles, Richard, Liam said, his voice low but firm. I'm talking about soil liquefaction and significant subsidence risk. The preliminary surveys on that land are not good. The air grew thick. Richard's smile vanished. Preliminary surveys? And where would a small-timer like you get your hands on surveys for a deal of this magnitude? A potential buyer hire my firm to assess the land before making an offer, Liam stated simply. They declined to proceed based on our findings. Marcus scoffed. They probably just got cold feet and used your report as an excuse. Dad's team did their due diligence. They're professionals. The implication was clear. Liam was not. Your team saw what you wanted them to see, Liam countered, his gaze unwavering. My team had no stake in the outcome. We saw the truth. Building there is a massive liability. The silence that followed was heavy and hostile. Richard stared at Liam, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. He saw not a son-in-law offering a genuine warning, but an upstart questioning his judgment. He saw an attack on his competence. Let me be very clear, Richard said, his voice a low growl. You will not speak of this again. To anyone. You will not sabotage my legacy project with your amateur hour theories. Do you understand me? It was not a question. It was a command. Liam looked from Richard's furious face to Marcus's smug sneer. He looked at Eleanor, whose expression was one of pure, unadulterated disappointment in him. Finally, he looked at his wife. Chloe's face was a mask of strained neutrality. She would not meet his eye. She was staring at her plate, her jaw tight. In her silence, he heard her choice. She chose them. She chose their wealth, their power, their precarious world built on ego and willful ignorance. She chose the illusion of strength over the reality of his integrity. A profound and sorrowful clarity washed over Liam. He had been trying to build a bridge to an island that wanted to remain isolated. He had been offering a partnership to people who only understood dominance. And the woman he loved was a willing citizen of that island. He picked up his napkin and placed it on the table. Perfectly, he said to Richard, his voice devoid of all emotion. And in that moment, the decision was made. Not in anger, but in the cold, hard light of truth. The foundation of his marriage had just been condemned. It was time to draw up the demolition plans. The house, his beautiful house, would be the first thing to go. It was a symbol of a life he had tried to build, and he could no longer stand to live inside a monument to a failed endeavor. He would tear it all down and build something new on solid ground. The 2 weeks of Chloe's girls' trip to a resort in Tulum were, for Liam, a period of quiet, methodical dismantling. The trip itself was the final, galling insult. It had been a surprise from her parents, presented to her the day after the disastrous dinner. You need to get away and relax, darling. Eleanor had cooed, handing her the tickets. All this stress can't be good for you. The unspoken message was clear. Liam, with his inconvenient truths and refusal to be properly subservient, was the source of that stress. Chloe had accepted with effusive gratitude, casting an apologetic but firm glance at Liam, as if to say, see, this is what happens when you make waves. She left on a Tuesday morning, blowing him a perfunctory kiss from the door of the town car her father had sent. Don't forget to water the orchids. And the cleaner comes on Friday. Love you, she called out, the words feeling like an automated message. The moment the car disappeared around the corner, a profound stillness settled over the house. It was the first time Liam had been truly alone in the space since it was completed. He walked through the rooms he had so carefully designed, touching the cool surface of the quartz countertop in the kitchen, running his hand along the smooth cedar planking on the accent wall in the living room. He had designed it to be a sanctuary, a place of peace and light, but it had become a theater for his own gradual erasure. That first day, he did nothing but sit in his office, the door closed. Her family thought of this room as his playroom, the place he made his doodles. In reality, it was the nerve center of a highly successful, discreet architectural firm. Liam's grandfather, a legendary but intensely private architect, had taught him two things. First, how to build structures that were both beautiful and enduring, and second, how to live a life that was the same. He had inherited not just his grandfather's talent, but also a considerable fortune, built on patents and quiet, brilliant investments. A fortune he had never disclosed to Chloe or her family. He hadn't hidden it out of deceit, but out of a deep-seated desire to be valued for himself, not for his bank account. It had turned out to be a failed experiment. He opened his laptop and began. The first call was to his lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Anya Sharma. He explained the situation with a calm, dispassionate clarity. He wanted to dissolve the marriage. He wanted to sell the house. Anya listened, her silence conveying her focus. "The house, Liam," she said when he finished. "Tell me about the title." "Sole ownership." "In my name only," Liam replied. "I purchased the land with funds from my inheritance trust before we were even engaged. The construction was financed entirely through a private loan from the same trust, which I have since paid back in full. Her name is not on the deed, the title, or any of the financing documents. Legally, she has no claim to the property itself." There was a pause on the line, then a low whistle. "You're kidding me. They've been living in your house, thinking you couldn't afford to buy them dinner." "Something like that," Liam said, a humorless smile touching his lips. "This makes things remarkably simple," Anya said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Divorce will be straightforward. Division of assets will be limited to what was acquired during the marriage for shared income. Given your undisclosed financial status, that will be a conversation. But the house? The house is yours to sell. When do you want to list it?" "Yesterday," Liam said. "But I'll settle for the day she gets back." His next calls were to his wealth manager and his real estate broker, an old friend named David. He instructed the manager to begin the process of firewalling his personal assets in preparation for the divorce proceedings. With David, he was more direct. "I need a for sale by owner sign, David. The best one you've got. And I need you to be ready to field offers starting in about 2 weeks. Serious offers only." David, who knew Liam's full story, was ecstatic. "It's about time, my friend. They've been walking all over you for years. Consider it done. We'll price it to move, but we won't leave a penny on the table. This house is a work of art." The final piece of preparation was the most painful. He went upstairs to their master bedroom. The scent of Chloe's perfume still lingered in the air. For a moment, a wave of sadness washed over him. He thought of the early days, of the woman he had fallen for, before her family's gravitational pull had proven too strong. He allowed himself that moment of grief, acknowledged it, and then let it go. He was a builder. When a structure was compromised, you didn't mourn it. You salvaged what you could and cleared the site for something new. He methodically began to pack her things. He took the expensive designer clothes from the walk-in closet, folding them with a strange, detached care. He wrapped her jewelry in soft cloth and placed it in its boxes. He packed her books, her photos, her collection of scented candles. He was careful not to damage anything. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about severance. A clean, precise cut. He moved all the boxes into the guest room and closed the door. The master bedroom, now half empty, felt larger, quieter. It felt like his again. Over the next 13 days, Liam lived a life of strange duality. During the day, he worked. He finalized the designs for a new pediatric wing of the city's main hospital, a pro bono project he had taken on. He reviewed structural reports for a skyscraper his firm was consulting on in Dubai. He was focused, productive, a master of his craft. In the evenings, he prepared for the end of his marriage. He gathered documents, the deed to the house, the statements from his inheritance trust, and a copy of the damning geological report on the Blackwood Bluffs property. He placed them all in a single, beautiful leather portfolio, a symbolic object that held the hidden power he was about to unleash. Chloe's texts from Tulum were a steady stream of casual condescension. "Hope you're managing okay without me. LOL. Don't forget to pay the landscaper. The invoice is on the counter. My friend Amanda's husband just got a big promotion. He's a VP now. So exciting. Each message was a small twist of the knife, a reminder of the role he was expected to play in her life: caretaker, administrator, and perpetual underachiever. He replied to each one with a simple, non-committal, "Okay," or "will do." His brevity seemed to go unnoticed. She was too absorbed in her world of poolside cocktails and social one-upmanship to detect the seismic shift happening thousands of miles away. She was sunning herself on a volcano, oblivious to the rumbling beneath her. The final text arrived the night before her flight home. "Can't wait to be home. So exhausted. This vacation was much needed. See you tomorrow." Liam looked at the message on his phone. "I'm sure it was," he murmured to the empty house. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark, silent lawn. Tomorrow, it wouldn't be so silent. He had set the stage, positioned the players, and reviewed the script. The final act was about to begin. The days of Chloe's vacation passed in a haze of sun, sand, and self-congratulation. She and her friend Amanda, a woman cut from the same cloth of privilege, spent their time lounging by the infinity pool, ordering expensive drinks, and complaining about the minor inconveniences of their charmed lives. Their conversations were a competitive sport of thinly veiled boasts. "Mark just closed a huge deal," Amanda would say, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. "The commission alone is more than most people make in a year. We're thinking of getting a place in the Hamptons." "Oh, that's amazing," Chloe would respond, feeling a familiar pang of envy. "My father just secured the Blackwood Bluffs parcel. It's going to be a legacy project. Absolutely massive." She leveraged her family's success as her own, a shield against the unspoken truth that her own husband didn't contribute to her lifestyle in any meaningful, monetary way she could brag about. Liam was a frequent topic of their poolside chats, usually framed as a gentle, pitying joke. "How's Liam's little art project going?" Amanda asked one afternoon, referring to his firm. "Oh, Liam," Chloe sighed, a well-practiced performance of loving exasperation. "He's happy in his little world. As long as he has his pencils and his notebooks, he's content. It's sweet." Really, the word "sweet" was delivered with the same tone one might use for a child or a simple-minded pet. It was a verbal pat on the head, dismissive and condescending. "You're a saint, Chloe. Truly," Amanda said, her voice dripping with insincere sympathy. "I don't know how you do it. Mark is so driven, so ambitious. It must be different being with someone who lacks that fire." Chloe didn't defend him. She just smiled a tight, martyred smile and took a sip of her margarita. This was the narrative she had accepted, had even cultivated. It was easier than confronting the uncomfortable truth that her family's definition of fire was the only one she recognized. It was easier than defending a man who refused to play their game. Her loyalty was a currency she spent freely with her family and friends, leaving her account overdrawn when it came to her husband. Meanwhile, back in the quiet, sunlit house, Liam was methodically untangling his life from hers. The quiet of the house was a balm. Without the constant undercurrent of judgment, without the pressure to perform or shrink himself, the space felt different. It felt like his own skin. He found himself breathing more deeply. A week into Chloe's trip, the phone rang. It was Richard. His tone was breezy, but it held the unmistakable ring of command. "Liam, my boy, hope I'm not interrupting your creative process." "Richard," Liam answered, his voice neutral. "Listen, I need a favor. Eleanor is having some people over tonight, and the smart lighting system on the patio is on the fritz again. You're good with that techie stuff. Can you pop over and fix it? I'd send my own guy, but he's tied up on the bluff site." Liam paused. In the past, he would have sighed and agreed. He would have driven the 40 minutes to his in-laws' house to perform a task that a technician could have done, all to keep the peace. It was part of his unofficial job description as the family's unpaid, on-call handyman. He was the one who set up their new computers, fixed their Wi-Fi, and programmed their remotes. They saw it not as a favor, but as a small tax he paid for the privilege of being married to Chloe. This time, The answer was different. "I'm afraid I can't, Richard," Liam said politely. "I'm in the middle of a project deadline." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Richard was not used to being told no, especially not by Liam. "A deadline? What? You got a big coloring assignment due." The joke was weak, laced with irritation. "Something like that," Liam replied, his calm unwavering. "You should probably call the company that installed the system. I'm sure they have a support line." "Right," Richard said, his voice clipped. "Fine. Don't put yourself out." He hung up without saying goodbye. Liam set the phone down. It was a small act of defiance, a minor skirmish, but it felt significant. It was the first tile in a long line of dominoes. He knew the call would not go unmentioned. Richard would complain to Eleanor, who would complain to Chloe. Chloe would then text him, annoyed, asking why he couldn't just be helpful. He braced himself for the message. It arrived an hour later. "My dad called me. He said you wouldn't help him with the lights." "Liam, what's the big deal? You know how he gets. Was it really that hard to just go over there?" He read the text, his thumb hovering over the keypad. He could explain. He could say he was tired of being treated like a servant. He could say his time was valuable. He could ask her why her father, a man with a 9-figure net worth, couldn't just hire an electrician. But he didn't. Explanations were for people who were willing to listen. Arguments were for relationships that could be salvaged. His was not one of them. Instead, he typed a simple response. "I was busy." Her reply was instantaneous, a volley of blue bubbles filled with frustration. "Busy with what? You can't take one afternoon to help my family? It's called being part of a family. You should try it sometime." He didn't answer. He put his phone on silent and placed it face down on his desk. He opened the leather portfolio and looked at the documents inside. The deed, the financial statements, the geological survey. Each page was a fact, a hard, indisputable truth in a world of perception and performance. His response to Chloe, to her family, to the last 5 years was all in this portfolio. It would be delivered in person, not over text. He spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone with Anya Sharma, his lawyer, finalizing the strategy. They went over the timeline, the legal declarations, the exact sequence of events. Anya was impressed by his thoroughness. "You're an architect in all things, aren't you, Liam?" she commented. "You've designed this whole thing down to the last screw. Most people come to me with a wrecking ball. You've come with a blueprint for a controlled demolition." "I want it to be clean," Liam said. "I don't want a war. I just want it to be over." He knew, however, that the other side would not see it that way. For people like Richard, everything was a war. They wouldn't go quietly. They would shout and threaten and accuse. They would try to bully him into submission, as they always had. He was prepared for it. His calmness was his shield. His preparation was his sword. And his truth was an unbreachable fortress. On the final day, the day of Chloe's return, David delivered the sign. Liam took it and walked out onto the perfect emerald lawn. The plastic felt cheap and flimsy in his hands, a stark contrast to the solid, honest materials of the house. He pushed the metal stakes into the soft earth. The sign stood upright, stark and brutal. For sale by owner. It was a declaration of independence. The quiet man was finally making a loud statement, and he hadn't had to raise his voice. The taxi pulled away, leaving Chloe standing alone in the driveway, her expensive luggage a forgotten heap beside her. The disconnect between the world she had just left, a world of pampered ease and assumed privilege, and the scene before her was so vast it caused a kind of vertigo. The for sale sign was an alien object, a tear in the fabric of her reality. She strode toward the house, her high-heeled sandals clacking angrily on the flagstone path. Panic was coiling in her stomach, hot and acidic. Liam stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed against the warm interior light. His calmness was a wall she couldn't seem to penetrate. "Are you having a breakdown?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Did something happen? You can't just decide to sell our home. This is insane, Liam." "I can," he said, his voice maddeningly level. "And I have. Please come inside, Chloe. We should talk." He stepped back, holding the door open. It was a polite gesture, but it felt like he was an usher guiding her to a seat at her own execution. She hesitated, then stalked past him into the foyer. The house was immaculate, cleaner than she'd ever seen it. There were no stray papers, no shoes by the door. It felt sterile, like a show home. "Where is all my stuff?" she asked, looking around the minimalist living room. The decorative pillows she'd spent a fortune on were gone. The stack of fashion magazines on the coffee table had vanished. The personal touches that had made it her home had been surgically removed. "I packed your belongings," Liam said, closing the front door with a soft click. "They are in the guest room. I've already contacted a moving company. You just need to give them a date and a destination address." Chloe spun around to face him, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. You packed my things? Who do you think you are? This is my home." "No, Chloe," he said, and the gentleness that had always characterized him was gone, replaced by something harder, something forged in the fire of years of quiet humiliation. "That is the core of the misunderstanding. This was never your home. It was mine. You were simply living in it." The words hung in the air between them, more shocking than any shout could have been. The implication was monstrous, unthinkable. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, the anger momentarily replaced by a chilling confusion. "The land was purchased with my money," he explained, as if discussing a simple architectural detail. "The house was designed by my firm and paid for with my resources. The deed, the title, all of it is in my name and my name alone. You contributed nothing to its acquisition or its creation. Legally, and now morally, you are a guest here, and your visit is over." Chloe felt the floor drop out from under her. She sank onto the arm of the sofa, her legs suddenly unable to support her. She stared at him, trying to find the man she thought she knew, the gentle, passive, slightly ineffectual man her family had so easily dismissed. He was gone. In his place was this stranger, this cool, calculating man who was dissecting their life with the precision of a surgeon. "My money," she scoffed, a flicker of her old arrogance returning. "What money, Liam? Your hobby firm? Don't be ridiculous. My father co-signed the loan for this house." Liam simply shook his head. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "No, he didn't. He offered to. He made a great show of it. In fact, he wanted you and me to believe that this life was possible only through his generosity. He wanted me to be indebted to him. I politely declined his offer and secured the financing myself. He just never bothered to check." The sheer audacity of it left her breathless. He had allowed them all to believe a lie. He had let them think he was dependent, weak, living on their charity. He had absorbed their scorn, their pity, their condescending advice, all while knowing he held all the cards. The humiliation of it was a physical blow. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "Why would you let us? Why would you pretend all this time?" "It wasn't a pretense," Liam said, his gaze unflinching. "It was a test. I wanted to build a life with someone who valued me for who I am, not for what I have. I wanted a partner, not a dependent. I wanted respect, which has to be earned, not purchased." He paused, letting the words sink in. "It was a test, Chloe, and you and your entire family failed spectacularly." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She knew without looking that it would be her father. Her first act upon seeing the sign had been to send him a frantic, furious text message. "Liam has lost his mind. He's selling the house. You need to get here now." "That will be your father," Liam said calmly. "I imagine he's on his way." "Good. It's better to have this conversation with everyone at once. It will be more efficient." The word efficient was so cold, so clinical. He was treating the dissolution of their marriage and the eviction of her from her home as a line item on a project schedule. The panic she'd felt earlier returned with a vengeance, but this time it was mixed with a dawning, terrifying respect. She had catastrophically, fundamentally misjudged the man she had married. The quiet, gentle lamb she thought she knew was, in fact, a sleeping lion, and she had just spent 5 years poking it with a stick. The doorbell chimed, a sharp, imperious ring. Liam walked past her and opened the door. Richard, Eleanor, and Marcus stood on the porch, a united front of outrage. Richard's face was blotchy with anger, his fists clenched. "What is the meaning of this, Liam?" he boomed. striding into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. Marcus and Eleanor followed close behind, their faces etched with matching expressions of disdain. You think you can pull a stunt like this? Sell my daughter's home out from under her. Hello? Richard, Liam said, closing the door behind them. Please come in. Have a seat. He gestured toward the living room with the same unnerving calm. I'm not sitting down, Richard roared. I want an explanation. You've been living off my family's generosity for 5 years, and this is how you repay us? By trying to make my daughter homeless. Liam didn't flinch. He waited patiently as Richard continued to rant. He let the accusations fill the air, that he was jealous, petty, ungrateful, unstable. He let Marcus chime in with threats about what would happen if he didn't fix this. He let Eleanor look at him with eyes that dripped poison, whispering to Chloe, I told you he wasn't right for you, darling. I always knew. Through it all, Liam remained silent, an anchor of stillness in their storm of fury. He let them expend their energy, their outrage, their blustering sense of authority. Chloe watched him, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. This wasn't the behavior of a man who was losing a fight. It was the behavior of a man who had already won. When Richard finally paused to take a breath, his chest heaving, Liam spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the lingering anger in the room like a laser. Are you finished? He asked. It was a genuine question. Richard was momentarily taken aback. Am I finished? You're damn right I'm not finished. I'm just getting started. Then by all means continue, Liam said, gesturing to the sofa again. But I would advise you to sit down. This may take some time, and I suspect you'll want to be comfortable. There was something in his tone, a complete lack of fear, a hint of pity almost, that finally seemed to penetrate Richard's rage. He stared at Liam, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He exchanged a look with Eleanor. Then, with a huff, he dropped onto the sofa. Marcus and Eleanor sat on either side of him, a trio of sullen judges. Chloe remained on the arm of the other sofa, perched precariously between her past and a future that was rapidly becoming a terrifying blank. Liam remained standing. He looked at the four of them, his family for the past 5 years. He saw the anger, the entitlement, the absolute certainty of their own righteousness. They were a fortress of arrogance, and they had no idea he had already tunneled underneath the walls. All right, Liam began, his voice taking on a new quality. It was no longer just calm, it was authoritative. It was the voice of a man in complete control. Let's clear up some misconceptions. I have prepared a few points to address the situation. He walked over to the sleek, minimalist console table against the wall. On it sat a single object, a handsome, dark leather portfolio. He picked it up and held it in his hands. It was the symbolic object Chloe hadn't noticed when she came in, but now it seemed to command the entire room's attention. The air was thick with suspense. The storm of their arrival had passed. Now came the quiet, the terrifying quiet before the lightning strike. Liam opened the portfolio. The sound of the latch clicking open was unnaturally loud in the silent room. He looked not at the documents inside, but at the faces of the people arrayed before him. He started with Richard. For 5 years, he began, his voice measured and even, you have operated under the assumption that I am a man of no substance, no ambition, and no means. You have treated me not as a son-in-law, but as a charity case you were forced to endure. You've mocked my profession, questioned my intelligence, and used me as your personal, unpaid IT support and handyman. He shifted his gaze to Eleanor. You have aided and abetted this. You've offered me condescending advice on how to be more like Richard. You have judged me on the cost of my clothes and the brand of my watch, finding them, and therefore me, lacking. You have fostered an environment where my wife was taught that my value was negligible. Then he looked at Marcus. You have been the most transparent, a crude echo of your father's beliefs. You've called my firm a hobby to my face. You've suggested I get a real job in your father's company. You have never once shown me a shred of genuine respect, only a thuggish contempt for anyone you perceive as weaker than yourself. Finally, his eyes rested on Chloe. The hardness in his expression softened, but only into a deep, profound sadness. And you, Chloe, you were the worst of all, because you knew better. You knew my work. You knew my character. But you stood by and you said nothing. Your silence was your consent. You chose their approval over your husband's dignity, again and again. You weren't just a silent enabler. You were an active accomplice in your own marriage's destruction. It was a systematic, verbal demolition. A list of grievances delivered not with heat, but with the cold, irrefutable precision of an auditor's report. Each statement was a brick being removed from the wall of their self-delusion. No one interrupted. They were stunned into silence by the sheer, brutal honesty of it all. They had never been spoken to this way, because they had surrounded themselves only with people who told them what they wanted to hear. Liam paused, letting the weight of his indictment settle in the room. "These are the reasons we are here," he said. "This is the context for what is happening. This is not a moment of madness on my part. This is a calculated, long overdue response to years of accumulated disrespect. This is a course correction." He pulled the first document from the portfolio. He held it up. It was the deed to the house. "Let's begin with the first misconception," he said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming even more powerful in its quiet intensity. "The idea that this is your house." He looked directly at Richard. "You believe you made this house possible. You believe I am living here because of your financial grace. You are mistaken." He laid the deed on the coffee table, turning it so they could read it. "This is the deed to the property. As you can see, the owner is listed as Liam Connor, not Liam and Chloe Connor, just me. I bought the land 2 years before Chloe and I were married, with funds from a family trust." He then pulled out a second document. "This is the record of the construction financing. As you can see, the loan was provided by a private lender and was paid off in full 6 months ago. The private lender was the same family trust. Your name, Richard, is nowhere on these papers. Your offer to co-sign was just that, an offer. A power play I had no intention of accepting. I allowed you to believe you were my benefactor because I wanted to see if my wife could love a man she believed was indebted to her family. The results of that experiment are now clear." Chloe stared at the papers, her mind reeling. It was true, all of it. The casual condescension, the years of feeling superior, of pitying him, all of it had been based on a complete fiction he had allowed them to entertain. The shame was a physical sensation, a hot flush that spread from her chest to her face. "So you see," Liam continued, his voice as calm as ever, "I am not selling our house. I am selling my house. Chloe has been living here as my wife, and now that that is ending, she will need to find somewhere else to live. Her things, as I said, are packed and ready to go." Richard sputtered, his face a mottled purple. You deceived us. You lied to us for years." "Did I?" Liam asked, cocking his head. "I never once told you I was poor. I simply didn't correct your assumptions. You saw what you wanted to see, a quiet man from a humble background who wasn't good enough for your daughter. Your arrogance was a self-imposed blindfold. I just chose not to remove it for you." Eleanor, recovering from the initial shock, tried a different tactic. She softened her expression, attempting to radiate maternal concern. "Liam, think about what you're doing. You're throwing away your marriage. You're throwing away your family. Surely we can talk this through. Chloe loves you. Does she?" Liam asked, turning his gaze back to his wife. "Did she love me when she laughed with her father about my cute little book box? Did she love me when she looked the other way as her brother insulted me? Or did she love the idea of me, a malleable man she could keep in this beautiful house, a testament to her good taste, but not a threat to her family's dominance?" He didn't wait for an answer. The love I was interested in required respect as its foundation, and that foundation was never built. He looked back at the portfolio in his hands. "But the house is just the beginning," he said, his voice dropping again, pulling them all into a vortex of dread. "This isn't just about the end of my marriage. It's also about the end of your delusion." The atmosphere in the room had shifted from merely tense to something far more volatile. It was like the pressure drop before a hurricane. Richard, Eleanor, and Marcus were still reeling from the revelation about the house, their primary source of leverage and moral superiority having been vaporized in an instant. They had come here as feudal lords ready to discipline a rebellious peasant, only to discover the peasant owned the entire kingdom. Liam let the silence stretch, allowing the full impact of their miscalculation to land. He watched as Richard's blustering rage slowly curdled into a dawning, horrified understanding. The developer, the man who prided himself on seeing every angle, had missed the most important one. He hadn't been dealing with an employee. He'd been dealing with an equal who had been patiently documenting every transgression. "You mentioned your legacy project, Richard," Liam said, his voice pulling the developer's attention with a magnetic force. "The Blackwood Bluffs, the crown jewel of your empire." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What about it? I warned you to keep your mouth shut about that." "I didn't say anything," Liam replied smoothly. "But my firm's report did." He reached into the leather portfolio and pulled out a thick, spiral-bound document. The cover read, "Preliminary Geotechnical and Feasibility Study, Blackwood Bluffs Parcel. Prepared by Connor Design Group for North Star Investments." He tossed it onto the coffee table on top of the deed. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. "That's the report my firm prepared 6 months ago," Liam explained. "The one that advised our client against purchasing the land. It details, with extensive seismic data and soil analysis, that the cliffside portion of the parcel is fundamentally unstable. It predicts a high probability of catastrophic land failure if any significant weight, such as a multi-story luxury condominium, is built upon it." Marcus let out a short, derisive laugh, though it sounded hollow. "That's just your opinion, Liam. Our engineers are the best in the business. They signed off on it." "Your engineers work for you," Liam countered, his gaze locking onto Richard. "They had a vested interest in giving you the answer you wanted. My firm was paid to find the truth, regardless of what it was." "There's a difference." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "But you're right. That report, on its own, is just one firm's assessment. It could be debated. It could be buried." He reached back into the portfolio, "which is why I felt a civic duty to ensure all the relevant parties had the most complete information possible." He pulled out a single sheet of paper and held it up. It was a printout of a sent email. "An hour before Chloe arrived home, I forwarded a copy of that full report, along with a personal cover letter detailing my professional concerns, to a few interested parties." He began to list them, his voice calm and methodical. "The head of the City Planning Commission, the chief editor of the city's largest newspaper, the state's Environmental Protection Agency, and, just for good measure, the lead underwriter at the insurance firm that holds the policy on your company's current projects." He looked directly at Richard. "I sent it anonymously, of course. As a concerned citizen, I wouldn't want to be accused of sabotaging your legacy." The color drained from Richard's face. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was a detonator. Liam hadn't just pointed out the flaw in his plan. He had broadcast it to every single person who had the power to bring his empire crashing down. The phone on the end table, Richard's phone, began to buzz incessantly. He ignored it. You wouldn't," Eleanor whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "I already have," Liam stated simply. "The truth has a way of being inconvenient, doesn't it? You've built a family, a business, an entire life on the principle of bullying reality into submission. But you can't bully geology, Richard. You can't intimidate a geological fault line." He wasn't finished. There was one more document in the portfolio. This one was thinner. He pulled it out and looked at it for a moment before speaking. "There's one final piece of this puzzle," he said, his voice softening slightly, becoming almost conversational. "The question Chloe asked. What money? The question you've all had but never dared to ask. You wondered how I, a man you considered a failure, could afford the time to doodle. You wondered why I wasn't desperate to join your glorious enterprise." He unfolded the paper. It was a summary statement from a wealth management firm. The numbers on it were astronomical, figures that dwarfed even Richard's considerable, but heavily leveraged, fortune. "My family was never poor," Liam said quietly. "They were private. My grandfather was Julian Connor." The name fell into the room and detonated silently. Even Richard, in his state of shock, recognized it. Julian Connor was a legend in the world of architecture and engineering, a near-mythical figure who had designed some of the most innovative and iconic buildings of the last century before retreating from public life entirely. He was renowned for his genius, his integrity, and his immense, quietly managed wealth. My grandfather believed that a man's work should speak for him, Liam continued. He despised the culture of celebrity and empty branding. He taught me that true worth is built, not declared. The firm I run, Connor Design Group, is not a hobby. It's the small, boutique entity that manages the intellectual property, patents, and a few passion projects funded by the estate he left me. I don't chase clients. I don't need to. I work on projects that matter to me, like the new pediatric wing for the city hospital, or a library for an underserved community. He placed a financial statement on the table next to the other documents. The deed, the geological report, the statement of wealth. It was a trinity of truth, a complete and total refutation of every belief they had held about him. I never wanted this, Liam said, his voice laced with a genuine weariness. I never wanted to have this conversation. I wanted a wife who would stand with me, a family who would respect me, regardless of whether I had $10 or $10 million. I gave you 5 years to show me that you could. 5 years to see the man, not the balance sheet you imagined. He looked at Chloe, whose face was now streaked with silent tears. The vacation you just took, the one your parents so generously gave you to get away from the stress I was causing, the resort you stayed at, my firm designed it. The land it's on is owned by my trust. The final revelation was so absurd, so perfectly, cruelly ironic, it broke through their shock. Marcus let out a choked, hysterical laugh. Richard simply stared into the middle distance, his world collapsing in real time. Eleanor looked as if she might faint. And Chloe finally understood. The entire time she had been there, pitying her husband, boasting about her father's power, she had been a guest in Liam's world. A world she had never even known existed. The quiet bomb had landed. The demolition was complete. All that was left was the dust and the silence. The immediate aftermath was chaos, but a strangely muted chaos. It was the chaos of a system that has just received a fatal shock, the frantic, useless twitching of a body whose brain is already dead. Richard, jolted from his stupor by the incessant buzzing of his phone, finally picked it up. His face, already pale, turned ashen as he listened. "What do you mean the permits are under review?" He rasped into the phone, his voice a shadow of its former boom. "What anonymous tip? It's slander. It's baseless." He listened for another moment, his eyes darting frantically around the room, landing on the geological report on the coffee table as if it were a venomous snake. No, don't issue a stop work order. We can provide our own engineering reports. They're impeccable, but his voice lacked all conviction. He knew, and the person on the other end of the line likely knew, that Liam's anonymous report would trigger a chain reaction of due diligence that his own carefully curated, optimistic assessments could not withstand. His legacy project was already turning into a toxic asset, a sinkhole for his reputation and his finances. Eleanor, meanwhile, had rushed to Chloe's side. Her strategy had shifted from maternal concern for Liam to damage control for her daughter. "Chloe, darling, don't cry," she murmured, stroking her hair. "This is a misunderstanding. He's just angry. He's hurt. We'll fix this. Your father will fix this." But as she said the words, she glanced at her husband, who now looked like a broken man, and her voice faltered. For the first time, she seemed to realize that Richard's power had a limit, and they had just crashed into it at full speed. Marcus was the only one who still had fight left in him, but it was a clumsy, desperate kind. He stood up, pointing a trembling finger at Liam. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Hiding all this, playing us for fools. This is sociopathic." Liam regarded him with an expression that was almost pitying. Is it simply holding up a mirror? "I didn't create the image you see, Marcus. I'm just the one forcing you to look at it. You were so certain of your own superiority that you never thought to question what was right in front of you." The fight went out of Marcus. He sank back onto the sofa, a deflated balloon of inherited arrogance. The truth of Liam's words was undeniable. Their blindness had been a choice. Finally, there was Chloe. She stood up, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. The shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a desperate, frantic need to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage. She walked toward Liam, her hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Liam, please," she began, her voice cracking. I am sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was blind. I was weak. I let them influence me. But I love you. I do. We can fix this. I'll change. I'll stand up to them. I'll choose you. Just please don't do this. Don't throw us away." Her apology, her plea, was raw and real. In that moment, she meant every word. But Liam had seen a version of this before, in smaller moments, after smaller slights. Apologies that lasted until the next family dinner. Promises of change that evaporated under the heat of her father's disapproval. He looked at her, and his heart ached for the woman he had once loved, the woman who had gotten lost somewhere along the way. But his resolve did not waver. "I believe that you're sorry right now, Chloe," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I believe you mean that. But an apology is not a time machine. It can't undo 5 years of choices. It can't rebuild a foundation of respect that was never laid." He took a step back, creating a physical space between them that mirrored the emotional chasm that had opened. "You didn't just fail to stand up for me," he said, his voice quiet but devastatingly clear. "You agreed with them. In your heart, you believed I was less than them. You pitied me, and you cannot love a man you pity. You can only possess him. I am no longer willing to be possessed." Just then, the doorbell rang again. The sound was crisp, professional, a stark contrast to the emotional carnage within the room. Liam, seeming to be the only one who had expected it, walked to the door and opened it. A man in a sharp suit stood on the porch, holding a tablet. He smiled warmly at Liam. "Liam, good to see you. I'm a little early, but I had a cancellation nearby, and thought I'd pop over." "David, come in," Liam said. "The timing is perfect." David stepped inside, his cheerful demeanor faltering slightly as he took in the scene. He saw Richard, pale and shattered, on the phone. He saw Eleanor and Marcus, looking like survivors of a shipwreck. And he saw Chloe, her face tear-streaked and broken. David, Liam's longtime friend and real estate broker, instantly understood he had walked into the immediate aftermath of the detonation. He recovered quickly, his professional mask slipping back into place. He looked at Liam, his eyes conveying a universe of support. "So, this is the masterpiece," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration as he looked around the foyer and living room. "The photos don't do it justice. The light in here is incredible." He turned his professional gaze on the stunned family. "David Chun," he said, offering a polite nod. "I'll be handling the sale of this magnificent property. We're expecting a great deal of interest. A Connor-designed home, especially one he built for himself, is something of a unicorn in this market." He said the name Connor with a reverence that was like another twist of the knife in the family's collective wound. The arrival of the real estate agent, so chipper and businesslike, was the final, surreal confirmation that this was real. This was happening. It wasn't a fight that could be won or a tantrum that would pass. It was a transaction, a closing, the end of a chapter. Chloe stared at David, then back at Liam. The calm, organized, and utterly final nature of it all finally broke her. The hope she had clung to, that this was a cry for help, an angry outburst, vanished. This was a plan, a meticulous, perfectly executed plan. She had been living in a house with a brilliant strategist, and she had been playing checkers while he was playing three-dimensional chess. "So that's it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's just over." Liam met her gaze, his own eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound and weary finality. "It was over a long time ago, Chloe," he said softly. "This is just the paperwork." The weeks that followed were a study in consequences. The world Liam had upended did not right itself. Instead, the new reality he had imposed began to solidify, setting like concrete. The for sale sign on the lawn of his house became a local point of interest, a symbol of a dramatic, whispered about upheaval in the city's elite circles. Richard's empire began to crumble with astonishing speed. The anonymous tip to the City Planning Commission triggered an immediate and comprehensive review of the Blackwood Bluffs project. The stop work order became permanent. The insurance underwriter, spooked by the geological report, launched its own investigation into Richard's entire portfolio, discovering a pattern of cutting corners and ignoring inconvenient data. His financing dried up. Lawsuits from his initial investors began to pile up. The man who had built his identity on the image of an unstoppable titan of industry was revealed to be a gambler who had bet everything on a bluff, only to be called by a man holding an unbeatable hand. He was forced to sell off assets at a loss, his gaudy mansion the first to go, to cover his mounting debts. The fall was as swift as it was brutal. Eleanor, stripped of her social standing and her primary source of identity, floundered. Her friends, the ones she had hosted at lavish parties and impressed with her husband's wealth, grew distant. In a world that valued only success, Richard's failure was a contagious disease they wanted no part of. She was forced to confront a life devoid of the status and luxury she had always taken for granted, and she found she had no other resources to draw upon. Marcus, without his father's money and influence to clear a path for him, was exposed as the mediocre and abrasive man he truly was. He lost his cushy, unearned position at his father's failing company and struggled to find work. The swagger was gone, replaced by a sullen, resentful bitterness. And Chloe moved her boxes not into a luxury apartment, but into a modest, two-bedroom rental in a respectable but far from glamorous part of town. The movers Liam had arranged were professional and discreet. They packed the last of her things from the guest room while Liam was out, and when he returned, the house was empty of her presence, the final severance complete. For the first time in her life, Chloe was truly on her own, without the safety net of her father's wealth or a husband to manage her life. She had to get a job. She found a position as an administrative assistant at a marketing firm, a humbling, shocking entry into the world of actual work. She learned about budgets, deadlines, and difficult bosses. She learned what it felt like to be judged on her performance rather than her pedigree. It was a painful, grinding education in reality. She tried to contact Liam. She sent long, pleading texts filled with apologies and promises. She called and left rambling, tearful voicemails. He never responded directly. Instead, a week after she had moved out, a letter arrived from his lawyer, Anya Sharma. It was polite, professional, and utterly final. It outlined the terms of the divorce settlement. Liam was not seeking to be punitive. He had established a trust that would provide her with a modest but livable income for 2 years, contingent upon her being employed or enrolled in a degree program. It was, the letter stated, transitional support to ensure her move towards self-sufficiency. It was not a reconciliation. It was a severance package. The house sold in less than a week, for a price well above asking. A bidding war had erupted between two wealthy admirers of Julian Connor's legacy, both desperate to own a home his grandson had personally designed and lived in. The closing was quick and quiet. 6 months later, the seasons had changed. Autumn had given way to a crisp, clear winter. Liam stood in his new home, a stunning penthouse apartment that occupied the entire top floor of a building he had designed years ago. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. In the distance, he could see the steel skeleton of the new pediatric hospital wing rising into the sky. His life was different now. His firm, the Connor Design Group, was no longer a secret. The story of the house sale and the Blackwood Bluffs collapse had, despite his desire for privacy, leaked to the press. He had become, much to his chagrin, a figure of public fascination, the quiet genius who had brought down a corrupt tycoon. The story had elevated his grandfather's legacy and brought a new, intense spotlight onto his own work. Clients now sought him out not just for his talent, but for his integrity. His quiet life was over, but his new, more public one was built on a foundation of truth he no longer had to hide. His phone buzzed on the granite countertop. He picked it up. It was a text from a number he didn't have saved, but he knew who it was. It was from Chloe. He had blocked her number, but she had clearly gotten a new one. The message was different from the desperate pleas of the past. It was short and simple. I start my final semester of my MBA program next week. Thank you for the push. I hope you're happy. He looked at the message for a long moment. There was no demand in it, no plea. There was a hint of sadness, but also a glimmer of something new. Acceptance. Self-awareness. He thought about the woman who had sent it. No longer the princess in the ivory tower, but a person learning to build her own life, brick by painful brick. He felt a flicker of something. Not love, not regret, but a quiet, distant hope for her. A hope that her journey towards self-sufficiency would also be a journey toward a better version of herself. He did not reply. He put the phone down, face up, and turned back to the window. He had torn down the beautiful house he had built because the foundation of the life within it was rotten. He had learned that a structure, whether a building or a marriage, is only as strong as its most fundamental components. Respect, integrity, truth. Without them, collapse is not a risk. It is an inevitability. He had lost a wife, but he had reclaimed himself. And as he looked out over the city, a city he was helping to shape, he knew he had made the right choice. He was finally living in a home that was truly his, in a life that was built to last. Liam's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, but about having the quiet integrity to stand by your principles, even when it's difficult. It teaches us that respect cannot be demanded or inherited. It must be earned through action and character. Sometimes, the most compassionate act for ourselves and even for others is to draw a firm line and demand that our worth be recognized. What do you think? Was Liam's response justified? Or was it too harsh? Could there have been another way? I'd be fascinated to read your perspective in the comments below. Your insights make this community what it is. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more tales of justice, redemption, and the quiet power of holding your ground. Thank you for watching, and until next time, remember to build your own life on the strongest foundation you can.